Jambo! I'd like to welcome you to AWS Community Day Kenya. My name is Jeff Barr. I've been part of the AWS team for almost 22 years. I am really looking forward to delivering this keynote to you today. I'm recording from my home office. I'm located in Seattle, Washington. You might or might not know Seattle. We're in the top left, the northwest corner of the United States. We're famous for all different kinds of things. Amazon, Boeing, coffee, grunge music, Seattle Seahawks for football, Seattle Storm for basketball, and of course, the Space Needle. So I'm Jeff. Let me tell you just a little bit about me to get started. I'm a husband coming up on 42 years of marriage. I'm a parent. I've got 5 grown children, grandparent, 6 grandkids so far, number 7 on the way, and perhaps we'll be here by the time of the community day. I'm a maker. I love to build things with 3D printing, with Lego, and with electronics, or some combination of those. I have been an AWS employee since 2002. I'll tell you more about that journey in just a little bit. And as my day job, I am the VP and Chief Evangelist for AWS. I've recently started putting my title and my company last on this slide, and I've realized it's actually for a pretty interesting reason. A lot of these other aspects of who we are, they're going to stay constant or increase over time, but our employer and our title, they're going to change from time to time. And honestly, I think it's better to define yourself in terms of all of these other characteristics versus letting your employer and your title fully define who you are, both to yourself and to others. I found that as I progress, that's actually a really useful tip to kind of not lock me in too much, to just kind of leading with a title, if you will. So give that a little bit of thought and perhaps think about doing that for yourself. Here's what I want to speak to you about today. I'm going to give you a sense of my background, who I am, and how I got here. Tell you what I do for my job today. I want to go through some selected AWS launches starting way back in 2004. Not my favorites, not the best, not the most popular ones. Just a set that I selected I thought you might find interesting and to me somewhat foundational and fundamental. And we'll wrap up with just a slide or two of closing thoughts. Let's jump right in. All right, how did I get here to be able to give you this talk today? Well, I've been in tech from a very young age. When I was like 4 or 5 years old, I started to actually understand what tech was all about. I was a young fan of the space program and followed that very, very eagerly. My grandfather was into electronics and repairing radios and televisions, and I somehow picked that up from him. As a teenager, I got to work in one of the first computer stores in the world at the very dawn of the personal computer era. That was super, super exciting to do that when I was 16 or 17 years old. I spent time in my career at startups and Microsoft and consulting. Oh, I did also earn a degree in computer science in and around as I was doing that. I joined Amazon in 2002 when we were just getting started with publishing and making web services available to developers. And in 2010, I was thinking it was time to go back to school and kind of brush up on some skills and get some new ones. So while I was working, I went back to the University of Washington, earned a master's degree in communication and digital media. The little tiny bit of how I got to where I am today. That picture is me at one of my first professional programming jobs, writing Motorola 68000 assembly language code on that very hand-built computer there in the background. Great way to get started. So what do I do today? Well, back in 2004, as we're starting to make all these plans to build and publish web services for developers, I was thinking of the best way to get that message out to developers all over the world. And I started the AWS news blog in November of 2004. So that means we're coming up on the 20-year mark on that blog. It's actually, as I write this, it's 232 days away from the 20-year mark. Over that time, I've written 3,303 posts so far. Probably get a few more in before that 20-year mark I'm hoping for. In addition to blogging, I work with the other members of the Newsblog team to mentor them and to review their content and help them to grow as writers and bloggers. I quite often do customer briefings. I focus on my main topic is called the Amazon culture of innovation. I talk about our leadership principles, the working backward model, and all the special things that we've evolved over the years to help us doing what we call start from the customer and work backward to build sites and tools and services and offerings for customers based on what customers really need. On Fridays, I participate in the AWS On Air live stream. I actually do a news segment. I do 5 to 10 minutes of AWS news updates every week. If that's in a time zone convenient to you, would be super excited if you were to tune into an AWS On Air episode in the future as well. All right, so what am I going to do today? Well, having written 3,300 plus blog posts over the years and participated in so many launches, I'm sometimes asked like, so Jeff, what is your favorite one? Or what was the best? Or what was the top performing one? And I find it hard to pick. I work with so many different teams that I think picking one and saying, well, this was the best launch ever, that's not really fair to all the others. And it's more a matter of personal perception and judgment than some unique quality of any particular launch. So I don't think of these as like the top launches or necessarily my favorite launches. As you can see, as a parent and a grandparent, you never want to play favorites. And honestly, I do the exact same thing with all the different service teams. At the point when I am work with them to understand their service and to craft a blog post to represent what they're building, they are my favorite team and my favorite service for that time. So what did I do? Well, I gave a little bit of thought to some of the most interesting launches over the years that were the kind of things that maybe opened up a new field, a new way to use AWS. Maybe it was something that gave our customers some brand new powers to do something that they didn't have the power to do before. Maybe it let them see the AWS world in a slightly different way. And also, a lot of these things I've picked were the starting point for a very long line of innovation. One of the things that I did notice as I was getting things ready to share with all of you, even our oldest services, the ones you might think, well, they've been around for so long, surely we've run out of innovation, or it's just standing still, it's just there as legacy. Utterly, absolutely not the truth. The reality is even the most basic, the oldest, foundational of these services, it's still alive, it's still kicking. We still continue to innovate and expand on that service each and every day. So here are the 8 that I picked for you, and we'll go through all of these in more detail in just a bit. Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon S3, Amazon EC2. And then one of these I think isn't really an actual launch per se, but the concept of regions and locations. I think that's really important. A virtual private cloud, relational database service, AWS Lambda, and the AWS Nitro system. Again, not the best, not the top ones, but a few I thought were really worthwhile and relevant to share with you. So let's review each one in a little bit of detail, what it is, a little bit of what the world sees, and then for each one I picked one of the newest features, so you can see that we're still continuing to enhance and evolve that service. Way back in 2004, we launched the beta of the Amazon Simple Queue service. This was a really interesting one because at that point, most of the world, if they knew of Amazon, they primarily thought of Amazon as their online bookstore. We had already expanded into other product lines. We had music and a few other product lines at that point. But by and large, most of the world said, okay, Amazon, they are my online bookstore. We launched that beta in November 2004. We got into production in July of 2006. That initial description, which I wrote, this service offers a reliable, highly scalable hosted queue for buffering messages between distributed application components. Pretty straightforward, really clean and obvious. There's my blog post that I wrote at the time when we actually went into production. I love to go back and read these things and just realize just how the model I put into place back then still applies today. Focus on the facts, focus on what it is, tell customers what they can do with it, invite them to actually check it out and to start doing something with it themselves, include important details like the pricing model, for example. This was the first beta launch from AWS. I think it really took the world by surprise for those who were really paying attention. A couple of important things to note about this. This was a web services API. It had the really important pay-as-you-go model, meaning that we didn't charge customers a fixed fee per month to use it. We didn't let them use it for free. We said, in order for this to be a sustainable service and for us to be able to do more services in the future, we're going to measure exactly how much of this service you consume, and we're going to bill you for that usage once a month. We call that pay-as-you-go. So to do that, we had to be able to have accounts and the ability to measure usage, the ability to do billing runs, to charge credit cards, lots and lots of interesting details behind the scenes to make that happen. When I give our culture of innovation briefings, one of the phrases I often talk about is this next item: willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. This means that sometimes we launch something new and we don't always put the bigger context around it. Sometimes we simply launch it. We let the world take their time figuring out exactly what it is that we built. I'm totally sure that at the point when the company that people thought of as their online bookstore first launched message queues, those who were paying attention were thinking, oh, what is this all about? This makes no sense whatsoever. That's okay. We're not going to mislead anybody, but we're just going to say, here's this new service. If you like it, fine. If not, we're not going to care, right? We're just going to put it out there and let developers find it. But the reality is, the right people did understand. We're okay with it taking a while for the world to catch on. The right people understood. People that had already built some kind of a distributed system, and they realized if you build a distributed system, you need something fundamental to connect up all the different parts of that distributed system. Those few people at the beginning looked at SQS and said, wow, I get it. This is the important part of a distributed application. I'm going to jump right in and start using it. So really interesting balance, willing to be misunderstood, but also making sure that we do share all the relevant details. We're not intentionally misleading anybody, but sometimes it's not worthwhile to paint the bigger picture. Just let people figure it out. Latest is we now support up to 70,000 transactions per second for the FIFO queues. So very high throughput, use them in the largest applications you can think about. Amazon S3. I'm betting that most of you already know Amazon S3 and have probably used it. There's my blog post. Launched that in March of 2006. So people are starting to pay a little bit of attention. They saw SQS, a few got it, maybe some didn't, but they're thinking, something interesting is afoot at Amazon. Again, how did I describe it? Developers can easily store any number of blocks of data in S3. Each block can be up to 5 gigabytes in length and is associated with a user-defined key and additional key value metadata pairs. Really clean, really straightforward, lived up to the name of the simple storage service. SOAP and REST interfaces, permissions, all the basics of being able to store data. I remember at the point we launched this, one of the journalists at the time said that they got it right away. And they said, this is what we can think of as a tier 0 service that can underlie so much of what we think of as the internet. And indeed, this was our first production launch of a service. All the fundamentals were there, including permissions, access control lists for controlling access to your buckets and to your objects, a design for 4 nines or 99.99% availability. So all those fundamentals, people looked at this and said, I get it. This is storage for the internet. I can jump in. I can do something really cool with this. S3 is still alive and kicking and doing amazing things today. There are over 340 trillion objects in S3. It averages 100 million requests per second and endures a traffic peak of 950 terabytes per second. So really big, really busy, super scalable, all the right things. Of course, we've added many, many, many features to S3 in the time since that launch. Okay, so we've got the message queuing, we've got the storage. Next, kind of clear, we need some compute. This is when people are really starting to realize that something is up. In August of 2006, I was actually at a resort with my family. We had been getting ready to launch this beta for quite some time. And it just so happened, of course, that my trip away with my family overlapped with the beta launch. So what do? Well, you take your laptop to the resort, you sit by the side of the swimming pool, and you write your blog post while your family is having fun in the water. So we launched EC2 in August 2006. And again, there's all the basics. Your applications run on a virtual CPU, the equivalent of a 1.7 gigahertz Xeon processor, 1.7 gigabytes of RAM, 160 gigabytes of local disk, 250 megabytes per second of network bandwidth. All pretty small by today's standards. And that first EC2 launch, well, you can look at it today and say, wow, that is clean and simple and ultra minimal and just enough for you to look at it and say, wow, I can actually do something really interesting with that. That first instance type was the only one we had. We billed at 10 cents per clock hour, and we billed on an hour by hour basis when we launched. But it was what people needed. It was resizable compute capacity. We started with Linux only, but it had that all important pay-as-you-go pricing model, and customers could spin up tens and hundreds and ultimately thousands and tens of thousands of instances as needed. When I think what's at really the heart of all this scalable capacity, there's one fundamental EC2 API that's kind of like the middle. It's called run instances. When you launch any server on AWS, ultimately, regardless of the application or tool or the auto scaling that you're using, deep down inside, you are making a call to run instances that says, I want you to launch some number of instances with this machine image, this instance type or these instance types, all these different parameters and settings. But at its very, very core is this really amazing run instances API. We always strive to launch the minimum lovable product when we build something new and are ready to ship it. When you look at that first EC2, it was minimal for sure, but it was definitely lovable as well. But it was missing some things. There was no persistent storage. If you know EBS now, you know we have EBS, the Elastic Block Store, that makes it really easy to create volumes of any scale and size, attach those to your instances. And you also know that the lifetime of that storage is totally independent of the lifetime of any particular instance. That was not actually in place when we launched EC2. The storage that was on the instance had the lifetime that was the same as the instance. If you rebooted the OS on there, you'd reboot onto the same hardware and you'd have the same storage. But if you shut down the instance and boot it up again later, that local storage is transient. It's gone. Nevertheless, developers looked at that and they said, you know what? This is enough for us to actually start building. I went back to Slashdot, a site I haven't actually visited for a very, very long time, and saw the post that someone had made on the very, very first day of that beta launch. Brought back some great memories of how exciting it was to participate in this. Of course, we continue to innovate on EC2. There are now hundreds of different instance types, very, very rich API. Latest new feature, we added some additional tagging options when you're registering or copying AMIs, the Amazon machine images from place to place. What's next? Good question. All right. So this one I didn't have quite a perfect name for, so I called it regions, AZs, and locations. In 2010, we went from our initial region, which was located in Northern Virginia, the famous US East 1 you might know about. And we were starting to get requests from customers to say, I would like to be able to do storage and computation in other parts of the world. And we understood that they wanted these locations to effectively be independent of each other. They wanted to have some control of where their data was stored, where their data was processed. So very early on, we said, okay, we're going to launch these regions, and we're going to give you, the customer, complete control of where your data is stored and where it's processed. And that model has persisted to this day. Super important aspect of AWS and the regions model. So March 2008, we took the first step toward towards scaling out, we launched the second availability zone, or AZ, with the idea that within a given region, we're going to have more than one AZ, so you can launch instances in 2 or more AZs. So if something were to happen to one AZ, the other one at that same region has separate connectivity and power and cooling and so forth. So something that affects one AZ isn't going to affect the others in the same region. So we kind of launched with or led with this idea of multiple AZs per region. And then in April of 2010, we launched the second region, this one in Asia Pacific in Singapore. And again, important phrase, each zone is designed in such a way that it is insulated from failures which might affect other zones within the region. As we start defining the concept of regions and AZs, that guiding principle from the very, very beginning helped us to make really good choices to help you build highly reliable applications. If you were part of AWS way back then, if you were an early user, at this point, we don't even have a full console. There was this really cool Firefox add-in called Elastic Fox that you could install into Firefox, and you could do some things visually. Some customers use that, but other customers use the command line or the AWS APIs. So building on that initial region, which had one availability zone, today we've got 33 regions and 106 availability zones open and in operation and accessible to you. But we're not finished. We continue to scale. We continue to expand. We are currently working on 6 regions that will incorporate 18 additional availability zones. We're working on regions in Germany, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Thailand, and Saudi Arabia. We're also working to do something we call local zones, which are kind of like an individual availability zone that is peered or paired, actually both really. It's peered and paired with a particular region that runs what is called the control plane. But the local zones we can deploy those more quickly and get those out closer to you as users. We currently have 33 local zones around the world and 18 more in the works, including one in Nairobi, Kenya. So that should be coming to you in the future. So each local zone, when you call to the APIs for a local zone, you actually call to the parent region that is going to run the control plane. So if you do a run instances call, let's say, you send that run instances call to the parent region of the local zone, and then the region, the control plane in the region, it's going to talk back to the local zone and say, a customer near your local zone needs you to launch an instance. And it basically reflects that run instance back to the local zone. This separation allows us to make these local zones smaller and gives us the ability to deploy them more quickly out in many more locations. We also have wavelength zones, which connect up into 5G telecom providers. We currently have those in 30 cities worldwide. And we have a piece of hardware called an outpost, which is available either an entire 19-inch rack or a server that fits into an existing rack. The idea here is sometimes you want to deploy AWS resources in your own data center or maybe in even like a branch office. So within Outpost, you get a carefully selected subset of AWS services. But the cool thing, and this is something I really find exciting, and one of the reasons I put all of this on my list, everything that you know about AWS, the regions concept, the APIs, the security models, the scalability models, all those things are going to apply to your regions, to your local zones, to your wavelength zones, and also to your outposts. I like that a lot because of the power it gives you as a user, an admin, an architect, a developer, that you can learn AWS and you can then apply that learning in lots and lots of different scenarios and locations. I think that's super, super awesome. Makes your learning all that much more worthwhile and more valuable. Our latest announcement, we just announced the upcoming region in Mexico earlier this year. We tend to pre-announce these regions anywhere from generally a year plus at a time, so we can have developers start to get ready, our customers can start to prepare to make use of the region, we have partners that want to make sure that they've got their offerings ready when that region comes available, and you can follow along on the AWS News blog, of course, to keep track of all these regions and see when they're launched. Another cool thing I chose was the Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, beta in August of 2009 and was production just a couple of months later. Here's how I wrote about it at the time. Amazon Virtual Private Cloud lets you create your own logically isolated set of Amazon EC2 instances and connect it to your existing network using an IPsec VPN connection. This was a gigantic step forward for us. And the thing I remember about this is the perception out in the world. Some people have been paying deep attention to EC2 and AWS from the very beginning, but others were saying, I kind of get it, but I don't know if is it corporate enough? Is it enterprisey enough for me? When we launched VPC, they took another look and they said, okay, Amazon and AWS, they really understand me. They get me. They see that I need this connectivity, this isolation, this extra degree of control. So within a VPC, and you if you're a current user, you know that you're always running inside of a VPC now. You get additional control over the AWS network that you set up. You can create subnets. You can use route tables to control traffic. You can connect to your existing corporate network. You can use the VPN gateway. We launched with that VPN gateway, and now there's actually a whole handful of different kinds of gateways for different purposes. We launched, very importantly, with support for a good collection of different kinds of existing VPN hardware and software. And when people saw this, they said, okay, this is the piece that helps me to connect AWS to my existing enterprise or corporate network. I can connect everything together. I've got full control over IP address ranges and traffic and networking. And so I can make effectively one big, hopefully happy network with my enterprise network and my AWS resources. A latest feature on VPC land is that we have a feature called Private Link that allows various AWS services to connect inside the VPC with the traffic staying strictly within the VPC. And so within Private Link, DynamoDB just recently announced that they have support for Private Link. So once again, excitement continues, new features continue to emerge. All right, the Amazon Relational Database Service, or RDS. First beta in October of 2009. How did I talk about it? RDS makes it easier for you to set up, operate, and scale relational databases in the cloud. You get direct database access without worrying about infrastructure provisioning, software maintenance, or common database management tasks. I think I'd use those exact same words today, honestly. I look back and say, managed to capture the precise value to developers of the relational database service. If you've ever had to do any of those things yourself, if you ever had to acquire hardware, install, configure, maintain, upgrade, patch, secure, maybe you need to scale up and add more storage, maybe you need to migrate to new hardware, maybe you have faster disks or larger disks. All those things are absolutely essential things to do to your relational database. They're often very, very challenging because the database is the center of your operation, and anything that has even the potential to disrupt or perturb your operation in any way, you have to proceed with extreme care. So RDS, we launch it, and it really shows customers there's a different way to do this. Simplify the operation of first MySQL, and then ultimately we now support MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, SQL Server, Oracle, and DB2, and then a whole bunch of different versions of each of those. At the core, again, like I said, run instances is the core of EC2. To me, one of the cool things about RDS is this modified DB instance call. Now, in past lives, past parts of my career, I've been a little bit of a part-time kind of hobby level DBA, but I understand all that pain of trying to scale up, trying to get new hardware, trying to move data from place to place. It's difficult, it's scary, it's time consuming. It's just not anybody's favorite thing to do. People want to have a database, they want to put data in there, run queries, get things back out. All the rest is just that overhead to actually do it. So modified DB instance hides all of that messiness of administrating your database. If you want a different amount of compute power, modified DB instance. If you need more storage or a different kind of storage, modified DB instance. you're either doing this from the command line, from the APIs, or you're just opening up the console and saying, I built my database with this much storage on this type of storage. I need something different now. And for example, the latest kind of storage we support on RDS is called IO2 Block Express. This is storage that is built to deliver consistent sub-millisecond latency, so very, very fast. It's designed to offer 5 nines of durability, lets you create gigantic volumes, up to 64 terabytes, and it supports a huge amount of I/O, up to 256,000 provisioned IAPS. Now, the awesome thing about both of these bottom halves of this slide here, regardless of the kind of storage you already have for your database instance, you look at IO2 Block Express and you say, I'm kind of pushing the limits of what I'm already using. It's time to switch to Block Express. You're not taking anything offline. You're not doing dumps and restores. You're not playing around with hardware. You're not looking at how can you do this without downtime. Your database is there. It's running. You modify the instance to use the new kind of storage. Behind the scenes, while the database is running at full speed and still storing data, retrieving data, doing transactions, doing backups, snapshots, all those things, it is quietly and efficiently upgrading your storage. No other concerns on your part. It just happens for you. So super, super awesome aspect of running and a relational database. All right, we can't forget AWS Lambda, right? So previewed in November of 2014 and production about 6 months later. Again, what did I say? We want you to be able to focus on your code and to work within a cloud-centric environment where scalability, reliability, and runtime efficiency are all high enough to be simply taken for granted. Wow. Not that many words to actually effectively kick off a brand new kind of programming, right? Now, today we call this serverless. I don't actually think I used serverless in my blog post. We actually just said, here it is, and here's what it does, as is my favorite way to do it. But that did serve to introduce the world to serverless computing. When I look back on that, it's really changed the way that our customers architect and build applications. But perhaps even bigger, it really gave customers this understanding of how can they build event-driven applications. So as we started to connect up different event sources within AWS to be able to, those event sources invoke Lambda functions. The first one was a new object appears in an S3 bucket. You can run a Lambda function to process that object in some way. Customers saw that and they kind of lit up and they said, wow, that's really powerful. I don't need my own polling system. I don't need notifications. I don't need to do any kind of batch stuff. I don't have any overhead. I simply say, when that object appears, run this code. Customers really, really love that. And later on, of course, we even put together an entire event bus system called Amazon Event Bridge. And then from that very beginning with Lambda, this deep integration into other parts of AWS where things happen somewhere in AWS and then you could invoke a Lambda function, that really, really inspired customers to do some pretty cool and pretty amazing things. Latest thing that we did, we added support for building serverless applications based on version 8 of .NET. All right, the Nitro system, okay? I have to tell you, I really have enjoyed this opportunity to speak with you, but over the years, I've super enjoyed getting to be able to launch and bring all this great news to our customers. The idea that I am getting to, in Amazon terms, we have this phrase we call dive deep. And so I get to dive deep into all these great services, understand them, use them, and then actually share them with an audience. It's super cool and super fun. And going on 20 years into it, it's still something I utterly, totally enjoy doing. So when the team came and said, we've got this really awesome thing we call the Nitro system, and it's hardware and software. And the thing that they told me, they said, well, we've been working on this for a while. It's kind of in some of our instances already behind the scenes, but we're ready to tell the world about it. And what it is, it's a collection of building blocks that we can put together in a lot of different ways to build EC2 instances and other kinds of hardware for our services. So instead of building them from scratch, we've got some very high level literal building blocks for storage, for security, for networking, and for block storage. The goal here is we can innovate faster than ever before as new customer needs arise, as any of our suppliers come up with newer and faster and more interesting kinds of processors. We're able to integrate those into new instance types and get those out to you, our customer, faster than ever before. The goal is give you access to new technology very, very quickly, and to always give you instance types that are going to be a great match for your workload, regardless of what that workload might be. I couldn't figure out one particular thing to highlight for the Nitro system, so instead I look at all the hundreds of different instance types we've launched over the years and say, this is the benefit you get from the Nitro system. You know, instances with a balance of compute and memory, instances where they have a higher ratio of memory to compute, the memory intensive instances, just this wide variety of different ways that you can efficiently access the kind of compute power you need for your applications. Okay, so those are just a few of my selections. I've left dozens, if not hundreds, of amazing things behind through lack of time to share them with you. Again, don't think that I chose the best or the only ones. Just a couple I selected to kind of get your thoughts moving. So what are my closing thoughts for you and things I'd like you to keep in mind throughout this amazing community day that you have in front of you? Well, you can see that AWS has actually been around for a while. Don't think for a second that all the exciting stuff has already happened. 100% for sure not true. We've laid a great foundation. We continue to innovate on those basic services. We continue to add new features, major features to those existing services, but new ones are coming up all the time. I didn't even have time to talk about any of the awesome stuff we're doing in generative AI, for example. But I do know for sure it's been an exciting 20 years. The next 20, 40, 60 are going to be just as exciting, if not more. Now, let's say you are new to AWS and you're looking at all these and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this looks totally amazing, but there's just way too much to learn. I get that. I identify with that. Don't let that scare you away. What I totally recommend you do, ignore almost everything that you hear about. Pick one or two services or even big features of one service. Pick those, figure out a way to build something with it or to put it into practice in what you're already doing. So pick a service or a big feature to get started. Immerse yourself in that. Figure out what it's all about. Use it, build something, do something legit and hands-on and practical with it. Solve a real problem with it. After you are really comfortable with that, you're going to naturally start expanding into other features or other services, but don't for a second think you need to master all these things before you have any power whatsoever. Pick one service, pick S3, pick EC2, pick a database service. Get one small, simple, straightforward thing working. Pat yourself on the back for having gotten that far. Congratulate yourself a bit, and then move forward from there. One final tip. I found that as an aid to learning, as you're diving into any of these things that you pick and you choose, take some notes, maybe write some sample code, and then create some content to reflect what you've learned. Share it within your friend group, your community, within your employer. Share it widely with the world. If it's something you think I might care about, look me up and send it to me. I'd be more than happy to review it and share it as well. But this cycle of learning, creating, sharing is actually something super powerful. It's how communities grow. It's how new people are going to learn. I fully recognize that all of us are new at some part of AWS all the time, and that this new content is going to be what helps new people to get started and to move forward. So it's no shame whatsoever to be a beginner. There's so many beginners. Be a beginner. If you're not a beginner, help those beginners to learn and feel comfortable with the tech and even more importantly, within your community. That is about all I've got for you today. My time is just about up. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have the most awesome community day ever. Would love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter as well. Feel free to connect. Feel free to send me some pictures of the event. Feel free to tag me. All in all, thanks again for watching and have an absolutely wonderful, awesome community day.